Welcome in the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on a Twitter's machine. And there he is, the Dean, Steven Lassen, senior editor over at Athlon Sports. Steven, how's it going, brother?
Mike, it is going fantastic. What another great weekend of college football around the SEC. I am getting a little sad because it's already week 9 and the season feels like it's almost like flying by. We're getting almost into November, which means bowl games and playoff. But man, every Saturday just seems to be jam packed with crazy games, awesome finishes. And, we've got another big time like Super Bowl type matchup in the SEC this weekend with LSU and A&M. So looking forward to it. Another great weekend around the conference.
Right, the only two teams that are undefeated in conference play, showdown for first place. Cannot wait to get there. But we got a lot to cover, Steven. We're going to do the panic meter. We're going to do the playoff projections. We're going to preview the upcoming games and a lot more than that. But before we get rolling, got to remind everybody, as always, brought to you by MyBookie, the online sportsbook. Head on over to mybookie.ag today. Sign up. The account's free. You put anything in there, initial deposit, put in that promo code, that SEC, THAT SEC. They'll match your initial deposit today. And who was your lock last week, Steven? I'm trying to remember.
Georgia.
Boom. Look at there. Listen to what
game winning streak.
There you go. Listen to the dean over here. Listen to the professor. Shay nailed his. I can't. I whiffed. I locked up Texas. What an idiot I am. You know what?
Well, I kind of did the reverse like psychology. I wanted to pick Georgia, but I picked Texas. But I said, I think Georgia's going to play really, really well here in a week where there was just a ton of toss-up games. So I thought, why not go with Georgia? So that was why I went with the Dogs. And we've got a 2-game winning streak. Our strength and conditioning coach, all the changes and workouts he made after our slow start has been awesome. We're looking ahead. We got momentum for the playoff, Mike. And by the way, LSU and Texas A&M, just like everybody predicted, right? Especially after week 1 where they both lost, that they're the only undefeated teams in conference play so far, just like we all predicted.
Right. And hey, before we go any further, Steven, I didn't even address this with you in our pre-meeting here, but just for clarification, just so anybody knows, I throw them all on the screen. This is the age we're living in now where, something gets posted to social media and everybody runs with it and everybody thinks it's the truth. So I want to start off, and we may have to say this 20 different times because it may catch fire, but Quinn Ewers does not quit Texas. He's not going to the draft. He's not quitting. That was all garbage BS, so don't believe everything you read. I'd like to make fun of Texas, but we're not gonna traffic in fake rumors here.
Yeah, I think it was kind of shocking, like when I saw that, and I had to go, really? That can't be right, right? And then, of course, I saw somebody say, no, this is fake. So I think Anwar Richardson, a friend of the program there, was the one who I saw mention that. But, man, big week for Texas, and now having to shoot down a few rumors. So what's new in this world of college football, right?
Exactly. So, hey, before we get rolling it with all we got covered, I just want to get your reaction. Steven, here's the updated SEC standings heading into week 9 here. And again, we referenced it already, A&M and LSU at the top, but it's a jumbled mess. What, if anything, stands out to your first impressions of the updated SEC standings?
I think the first thing is seeing Vanderbilt at 2-1 in conference play and ahead of Alabama. That's pretty shocking, right? Who in their right mind would have predicted that this preseason? But also kind of what we talked about just a few minutes ago, which is A&M and LSU, the only undefeated teams in conference play. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody predicted that in the preseason, but who would have predicted that after seeing those two teams lose in week 1 to Notre Dame and to USC? So kind of a weird season, but also just in general, seeing those 16 teams, no divisions, all as one conference. It is a jumbled mess at the top and in the middle. And at the bottom, it seems pretty clear. But at the same time, this is a totally new era. And just thinking ahead of how many big time matchups we still have and what that might mean for the tiebreakers and all that, it's going to be a fascinating race down the stretch.
Yeah, I can't wait for it, Steven. But before we get into all we got to get to, everybody's favorite, or unfavorite, but my favorite, Steven, the updated SEC scoring efficiencies. Again, week after week, I think this gives us a better indication of where things are trending, and that's the real value. Where were these teams at week by week? You want to be in the upper right corner, and you do not want to be in the bottom left corner. And trending towards the elite, even though they're following each week, is Ole Miss, Texas, and Tennessee. And again, if this is your first time seeing it, very, very, very simple metric. How many points are you scoring based on how many offensive snaps are you taking? And then for the defense, how few points are you allowing based on the snaps your defense is facing here? So anything stand out to you here, Steven, among the updated SEC scoring efficiencies after 8 weeks of play?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I think this is kind of a unusual observation, but it seems like if you was to like overlay these charts from week 1 to now, you would see a little bit of separation. And it feels like we get this every week when we look at the chart. The teams have kind of separated into these tiers. And so I think it's pretty telling just to see how it's progressed to this point of the season. And I think you start to look at that elite kind of quadrant there. Georgia, Texas, and it'd be interesting to see what Ole Miss looks like after the week off. You have Alabama, which has kind of fallen back off of that elite tier just a bit. And then over just in the middle right now, Texas A&M, a team very much alive for the college football playoff, that huge matchup against LSU this week. I would like to see them a little bit closer to the right side, especially on offense as we go forward into the month of November with this showdown. So kind of really interesting just to see how it has changed, and also just to see how the teams are kind of clustering together.
Right. And to your point, I was going to say this, Stephen, A&M and LSU, again, showdown. We're going to preview it here in a little bit, but the two undefeateds in this conference, and I think it says something that even though they are not close, based solely on the scoring efficiency to the top right where you want to be, I think it says that these coaching staffs are doing an outstanding job, and the players in critical situations, even though the game has not been going their way necessarily, very few blowouts for A&M or LSU against FBS competition. Yet, does that really matter, or does it matter that you're making the plays? All that matters is you're winning and losing, and just by looking at this, you know that LSU and A&M are making the plays when the game's on the line, while some others like Ole Miss and you could throw Tennessee in there for Arkansas and Alabama for 2 games now are not making the play. So I'd much rather be making those critical plays at the right moment, and that's going to decide championships.
And I think what that kind of gets at to me is an observation that kind of struck me this weekend watching A&M and LSU, is that it feels like the coaching staffs and both of these teams are, number one, they're getting better week to week, but it also feels like the coaching staff is just getting the most out of both of these rosters. Certainly I think just in terms of comparison, these two teams are flawed in certain ways. Georgia and Texas, and I think, to some extent, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and, probably forgetting somebody in that conversation, a little closer to probably to the elite, like if you look at the advanced metrics over play or from week to week. But at the same time, it feels like A&M and Mike Elko getting the most out of this roster. Same thing for LSU. But they're not only just getting the most out of it, it feels like they're getting a lot better in the course of the season, which I think is a big credit to Brian Kelly and Mike Elko too, because they have come a long way since that week 1 performance and just what they've been able to do so far in SEC play.
And as if we needed any further evidence, Stephen, paying Jimbo whatever it cost to get him out of here was worth every penny. Thank you, Mike Elko, for saving this program. You know what?
100%, Mike. I mean, look at how far A&M has come since last season, and also from game 1 to this point of the year. I mean, somebody on this show said A&M would go into the month of November with a chance to make the playoff way back in the offseason. And it seems like he took a lot of flack for it. Now, maybe I just got like an axe to grind. I forgot about that. But no, in all seriousness, I mean, Mike Elko is doing a great job with this roster. Like I said, getting the most out of it. I'm really fascinated to see how far this offense can come, because they're going to have to get a little bit more, I think, out of this group to beat LSU, and then also to beat Texas. If they get to 10-2, I think they can make the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm. Shout out a couple super chats here, Stephen. VFL Logan B. Appreciate you, brother. Hope you enjoyed the dynasty while it lasted, because ain't nobody give a damn about the whole state of Alabama. BGFNO. Appreciate you, Logan. And another Vol here, cousin Phil Watson. Nico broke, though. The second half of the game against Alabama represents the second half of the season. It's about to get serious on Rocky Top, according to Phil. And shout out Phil. He's exactly right. It's two big time plays by Nico, and it won Tennessee the game. The rollout to the right, throwing a dime to Dante Thornton, led to a Dylan Sampson touchdown, and then of course the incredible throw to Chris Brazzell. I mean, those 14 points swung that game. But again, had he been hitting all the ones that were there, Tennessee probably won that game by 20 points. But so again, I'd much rather that the plays be there and they're just and hell, to Nico's credit, also Steven, I think you would agree with this. A lot of the plays that or throws that he did make, they were getting dropped. So it's been a calamity, but they pulled out. That's all that really matters.
I think on Tennessee's offense, and Mike, feel free to push back on this if you think that I'm being silly. It doesn't feel like they're that far off from actually having something a lot better. Because I went back, before the Alabama game and watched, the games against Florida, and there was one other one, I think the Arkansas one. And you just see it's like it's a play or two here or there. It's not, I think maybe some of the SEC defenses have figured out better ways to attack Josh Heupel's offense, but they haven't figured out how to completely shut it down. But you can also kind of figure out that, hey, if they just catch the ball, if the quarterback is just slightly more accurate, if they have a little bit better protection in certain cases, the offense can go to that next level. And that was the fascinating thing on Saturday was it almost seemed like Nico played better after taking that shot where he left. It's almost like it got him into the flow of the game. He used his legs a couple times, and then he misfired. But then those key ones that he landed, obviously, were the difference in the game. So if he can just land a few more, I mean, you could have scored easily over 30 points.
Right. All right, Steven, let's get into your updated college football playoff projections and thoughts and prayers to your mentions, Steven, after this week. I mean, I don't know how you did this, but again, we say this every week. Say it for anybody that missed it or is new to the show. The playoff, the way they're doing it, it's wacky. We don't necessarily agree with it, but this is the way it's going to go. The highest ranked conference champions are going to get a bye. So we've got Steven's projections. Oregon, number one, as the Big Ten projected champion. Georgia, number two, as the SEC champion. Miami, number three, as the ACC champion. And Kansas State, four, as the Big 12 champion. So just for clarification, Steven is not saying that Kansas State is better than Texas or Miami's better than LSU or anything like that. It's just this is the way they're going to do it, and these teams get a bye. And then the first round, you get home games if you're the higher seed. So Texas, number 5, you'll be hosting Boise State, number 12. We've got Ohio State, number 6 seed, hosting number 11 Notre Dame. And then Tennessee, the 8 seed, making a big jump up here after beating Alabama, hosting number 9 Clemson. And then LSU gets the 10 seed, and they would travel to Penn State, the 7th seed in the playoffs with a couple bubble teams. Indiana, Iowa State, get the hell out of here. I'm waiting for those teams to get exposed, Steven. But the real teams here, the A&M's creeping in, 6-1. They're right on the bubble there. Alabama at 5-2, Ole Miss at 5-2, and Missouri at 6-1. Can you break down these projections for us, Steven?
Absolutely. So really close call at number 1 this week. I could easily went with Georgia as the projected champ and the number 1 overall seed. So Oregon's 1, but really you could throw Georgia in there and I wouldn't disagree with you at all. Oregon has the 0 in the win column, of course, right now, kind of one of the reasons why they get the 1 seed for this week. But also I think, Mike, as we're looking ahead, I think there's kind of 2 things that I'm following. Number 1 is what's happening outside the SEC. Because we saw this weekend some of the Big 12 favorites, BYU and Iowa State, barely survived against teams with losing records. And I think I bring that up because looking ahead, if you're some of these teams on the bubble, whether you're Tennessee, whether you're LSU, Texas A&M, even Ole Miss, if they can play their way back into it, you're going to need some of these teams to start losing soon. I think there's still a lot of losses to come, but now that we're in this, kind of last stretch of the season, second half, you can kind of start to focus on what teams need to start losing. So I think if you're one of these bubble teams in the SEC, start rooting against or hoping that like Iowa State, BYU, Kansas State all lose. The other thing is, I think if I'm, Texas, Georgia, I feel probably pretty good about my standing. This is assuming they win out. They'll probably be on the good side of the bubble. LSU, A&M, huge for playoff purposes. Missouri, Alabama, huge for playoff purposes this week. It feels like we've got two, I would say Missouri, Alabama, more so an elimination game. I think A&M, LSU, the loser of that one is not necessarily out. It just gets a lot harder. And Tennessee's win over Alabama puts them back in. Alabama very much in jeopardy of missing the playoff, absent a probably perfect run the rest of the way.
What's your thoughts on this, Steven? I'm seeing this from Texas people, and I don't necessarily disagree it. That, I mean, ideally you'd be the 1 seed and all that, but could you make the argument that being the number 5 seed could be an advantage? Because you're going to get the G5 champ. You're going to get him at home. Good luck. I don't care how many good running backs they got. They may have the Heisman Trophy winner. They ain't beating Texas, not in Austin. So, again, maybe we should assume nothing this crazy year. But is there an advantage, perhaps, to being the 5 seed and getting the G5 in round 1 and then getting Kansas State round 2? I would almost prefer that to I don't know. What's your thoughts? I'd rather get Kansas State than Clemson, Tennessee in round 2.
It's a really interesting debate because I think if you're a team I guess the question would be, is it a rest versus path type of thing? Because if you are the SEC champ, you get that week off. You don't have to play. You can get your guys healthy. Whereas if you are the 5 seed, you, in theory, should have a pretty favorable path to that Final Four. Because I'm guessing if Texas is the 5 seed in this scenario, they're going to be favored by double digits over Boise State and probably 9, 10 or more points against Kansas State. So that's a tough one. I would always probably choose the rest factor. But the other flaw in this system, again, is there's no home games for those teams in the semifinals. If you're Georgia and you get that number 1 or number 2 seed, in addition to the rest, you should have a home game. So, I guess there's a little bit of a trade-off. I personally would always choose the rest, but I could also see the total argument that, hey, this path is pretty favorable if you're the 5 seed in Texas.
Mm-hmm. And then I am not saying this, Steven. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not trying to mock them or anything like that. But one team I do not see listed is the Vanderbilt Commodores. And I know they're playing Texas, and I know they're massive underdogs, but just bear with me here. I'm going to throw up their schedule. And this is a massive if, but if they win out, they'd beat Texas. They'd beat Auburn. They beat South Carolina. But really the key one's Texas, at LSU, and Tennessee. This is a crazy question I'm about to ask you, Steven, but if they go 10-2, would you have them in the playoff field?
I think you have to give it pretty serious consideration, right? I mean, I actually thought about that this week. I was like, I probably should include Vanderbilt in the bubble watch because of the game against Texas this week, LSU and Tennessee. So, yeah, I mean, if you go 10-2 with wins over top 15 teams in LSU, Tennessee, Texas, and Alabama, I think you're probably making the college football playoff, as crazy as that sounds. So, yeah, Vanderbilt should very much be one of those bubble teams, pending, of course, if they lose this week, it's going to be really hard to get in. But going into this week, they're absolutely on the radar. One thing, I think on the Tennessee LSU discussion too, since this being the first year of the 12-team playoff, I think we're all kind of trying to figure this out in real time and trying to figure out when we get those first rankings, like what does the committee value and all that. Mm-hmm. I am curious to see how they evaluate Tennessee and LSU because LSU is ahead in the AP poll. LSU just beat Arkansas. Tennessee lost to Arkansas. So comparable resumes, and especially since LSU will get Alabama coming up, I don't know if that factors at all if they're both fighting for the same spot. LSU's got to beat A&M, but it will be interesting to see what the committee values when they're trying to dig into some of these resumes because some of these things could end up mattering for spots 9, 10, and 11 or 12.
And what about? So I just asked you about Vanderbilt. We see all these other SEC teams listed: A&M, Alabama, Ole Miss, Missouri. Let's take them off the table. Is there any other SEC team? Not that you're predicting this happens, but say they run the table. Is there any other team that could get into the conversation like Arkansas? I know they just had a tough loss, but you'd get wins over Ole Miss, Texas, Mississippi State, Missouri, and Ole Miss, Texas, and Missouri are all on here. So that I would feel like those are quality wins. South Carolina, you'd have to beat A&M, Vanderbilt, Missouri, Wofford, and Clemson. Again, 3 teams that are currently on here, or any other. I mean, any others to come to mind that if they win out, you would at least consider them to make the playoff here.
I think all those. I mean, I think it's fair to say if all those went out, given the schedule, they would be in consideration. What about Florida as well?
Mm.
You would have Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, 4 ranked opponents still to come. I do feel like we're tracking, and of course I should say, Florida is an extreme long shot. They're an extreme long shot to win those 4, but if they were to, I think that would at least give the committee something to think about. I do feel like we're tracking that 10-2 is kind of where you want to be for the playoff. I think 9-3 is probably going to be hard to get in, just based upon what we've seen so far and what the resumes potentially look like.
But to your point, Stephen, again, I realize this. People don't turn this off. I'm not saying it's happening, but
nobody drive off a bridge, please.
Huge, massive, biggest if in the world, because Billy Napier's still your coach. But if you're beating number 2 Georgia, top 5 Texas, top 10 LSU, top 15 Ole Miss, and you are not in the playoff, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Again, if you're that red hot, you deserve a shot. Because if you do all that, you can win the whole dang thing, which, again, I give that like a 1% shot of happening. But if it does, I think that should be honored.
Not to mention, if this were to play out, your losses would be to Miami, Texas A&M, and Tennessee, 3 playoff teams. So there's no bad loss there. Now, they've looked bad in those losses. And again, it's a pretty extreme long shot. But I guess if you're looking for like a crazy chaotic scenario, when you have those 4 ranked opponents all in the top 20 still to come, there's an opportunity there to at least play your way into it. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's kind of the crazy 2024 college football scenario that could happen, I guess.
It could, Stephen. But you know what else could happen? All these terrific cousins listen to the show while they're sitting there listening to their playoff projections and dreaming about where they want to go. I dream about them taking advantage of this offer from Manscaped. Come on, Steven. Manscaped's got a new innovation, the Chairman Pro. They sent it over to me, and that's why I keep it so trim and nice, Steven. I use the Chairman Pro over at Manscaped. Manscaped.com. Join the 11 million men worldwide that have taken advantage of this Manscaped offer. Go to Manscaped.com, promo code THAT, SEC. That's THATSEC. Same promo code as the MyBookie. You get 20% off your entire order and free shipping over at Manscaped.com. That's that SEC over at Manscaped.com. 20% off your free shipping over at Manscaped. Get you a chairman. Steve, I may send you one for Christmas for all the hard work you do for this show. You know what?
I need to join the millions of men who have that. I don't have that, so that promo code is very appealing to me as you're sitting here talking about it.
Well, speaking of millions of men, Stephen, millions of men across the South are panicking after Saturday's action here in the SEC. Who are you most panicked about? Where's the panic meter going off the rails after some tough losses over the weekend?
Mike, is it possible that 10, like in 10 being like Chad Morris bad, or high level of panic, is it possible that 10 is not enough to hold the panic level of Alabama right now?
Oh, at mighty Alabama. Remember, Stephen? Remember Alabama had us all under their thumb, under their boot. They did whatever the heck they wanted. Now we live in a world, Stephen, not since 1984 have they lost to Vanderbilt and Tennessee in the same season, and it just happened, and more losses are likely coming because Jalen Milroe has regressed. The defense has got no teeth. Again, I get it. They just held Tennessee to 24. Well, if Nico didn't miss 3 open touchdowns, I mean, it would have been 50. So I apologize, Steve. I know that this is your panic meter, but I am panicked. You are right about Alabama.
Absolutely, Mike. I mean, we can start like on 3 different sections here for Alabama. We'll start with the offense. Game on the line, and the last 4 drives, Alabama had 3 yards of offense. So in a must-win situation, Kalen DeBoer's specialty completely went quiet. To your point, Jalen Milroe has, I think, not necessarily, I don't know if, I guess regressed is probably a fair word, but I came into that game expecting him to have a big time performance. Tennessee's defense obviously had something to do with that, but the coming into that game, Alabama needed the offense to deliver. It didn't do that. Defensively, gave up 5.8 yards per play. May not seem like a lot. That's the highest mark that Tennessee's had in an SEC game this season. And there were several missed plays by Tennessee, of course, in the passing game. Coaching, we can talk about how sloppy they were. The penalties, shooting jump shots. I'm not exactly sure what that's all about, but it looks cool. So there's offensive issues here. You know, they were running the ball kind of well at one point, kind of went away from it. Milroe's throwing interceptions. He's not really kind of building on that performance against Georgia. We know the issues the defense has, and there's the coaching angle to all this, which is, you know, they've been sloppy. Can Kalen DeBoer get this team refocused in SEC play? Because you get Missouri and LSU, and you still have to go to Oklahoma. And of course, there's the big one against Auburn, but a totally different position. Alabama having 2 losses, and honestly, probably needing to win out to have a shot to make the college football playoff. That's almost unthinkable considering what we thought coming into this year.
I can't disagree with anything you just said, Steven. I mean, it's rough right now at Alabama, and I don't know that this is going to get fixed. But real quick, you know what is going to get fixed, Steven? Our love for Cousin JR. Thank you, Cousin JR. What a man. He just gifted another membership, this time to Cousin Bodo Baggins. What a name. What a name. But thank you, JR. You're the man. But yeah, Alabama. Steven, what are we doing here? And again, Jalen Milroe, he's like a shell of himself here. What happened to defense? This used to be the best defense in the country, and not even close. And I don't know that this is getting cleaned up. I mean, it seems like it's getting sloppier. It seems like they beat Georgia, and then they just thought they were God's gift, and they've not. I mean, they have a losing record, Steve. This is beating Georgia, a losing record. Imagine that. That is just insane. And the pressure's ramping up, and people are turning on Kalen DeBoer. I still think he's a good coach. I do not think he's a good fit, and I think that is showing itself. And I believe their recruiting is still out of this world, but I don't credit DeBoer for any of that. I credit that to being Alabama, top 2 program in the country. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know that there's answers here, but if this man misses the playoff, which it looks like he is doing, he's not going to last. He's not going to last more than 2 seasons. That would be my guess.
This is kind of a nebulous thing here, and I know we talked a little bit about it last week, but it does feel like there's not that mystique anymore with Alabama with Nick Saban gone. And I don't mean that to be like negative. What I mean is like Alabama feels very much like every other team in the country, and that the peaks and the ups and downs are going to be significantly more prominent than ever before. It's very hard in college football to meet the Nick Saban standard week in and week out. Like Georgia, I mean, it's probably the closest. I mean, look at what's going on at Ohio State with Ryan Day. Look how many games that he wins, and everybody's still not happy with him. So
Right.
There's some of that, and also Mike, I don't know if you feel the same way, but sometimes when I look at their roster and after watching the game, it feels like they've had some personnel problems that have been building for the last couple of years. And it sort of feels like they're continuing this year after some of the things we saw last year. And that's on the previous staff, and some of it's on Kalen DeBoer for not getting it fixed during the season. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, I think you're right on, Stephen. I think people don't want to say it. I said it. and I was the King Dynasty. But that was the worst coaching staff Nick Saban ever had last year. It was awful.
Yeah.
And now again, when he left, players hit the portal, so the roster would be different with Saban. But I don't think you can look at this roster right now and say it's a top 3 roster in the country. Now that doesn't mean it's awful. It's top 10 still, but yeah, there's a drop off. There's a drop off, and it's not all on DeBoer because you're right. I mean, penalties have been an issue for years, lack of discipline, things of that nature. But I don't know. This is just, it's not good, and I don't know that it's getting better anytime soon. I really don't. I think this is Alabama will still be relevant and they'll still compete, but I don't know. Especially again, I'm trying not to overreact here after 7 games of DeBoer, but after 7 games, I don't think that he's going to win a championship at Alabama, which I would have almost guaranteed before I saw this team play under him.
Yeah, and just thinking kind of out loud here. I mean, I know the broadcast kind of brought this up on Saturday. Ryan Williams is pretty special, but you don't who are the other difference makers? Like sometimes it feels like to me, just watching Alabama, it's like, hey, hope Ryan Williams can go up and make a play, and there's not enough guys getting open. And of course, Milroe has been a little bit more inconsistent. Some of their defensive personnel, of course, too, is not as good as we're used to seeing. The other thing is it's kind of striking when you look at how their season has played out. I mean, they didn't play well against South Florida, really. They didn't play well against Vanderbilt. They played well in the first 2 quarters against Georgia, but certainly not in the second half. So, I mean, the first half against Georgia was probably their best of the season, but there's been a whole lot of just kind of, way less than the standard we're used to seeing at Alabama for most of the year, right?
Yeah, and I remember in the fall camp, I said this is a huge red flag with Brian Williams. I'm not going to tell you how old he is because everybody in the world knows, but that this is the star of the camp. Now he came out against Georgia, and I said, "Oh, okay, I'm just an idiot because he's just that good." But now I think we're back to where I started, where it's like, why is this guy who reclassified that is still supposed to be in high school? Why is he the star of the program? And if he was at Vanderbilt, no offense to them, I know Vanderbilt whooped him, but if he's at Vanderbilt, I get it. If he's at Auburn, I get it because Auburn is not where Alabama is. But to have him be the focal point of the offense at Alabama, I think that says something about this roster and what it's lacking.
Yeah, I mean, right now, Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard are the only receivers that have over 10 catches. Justice Haynes has 15. To your point, Ryan Williams is a pretty special player, and he's going to be a postseason All-American. He was a midseason All-American for us over at Athlon Sports. But there's just not enough difference makers in the passing game right now, and the run game, which averaging about 4.6 yards per carry. Miller and Haynes have shown flashes, but still not that consistency I think you need, and some of that's on the offensive line too. So it's really weird to be looking at Alabama at this point and thinking they're going to miss the college football playoff. But also when you look at the roster, you can also see some erosion, I guess, in talent over the last 2 or 3 years, and some of this is portal, some of this is coaching too.
Hey, shout out Cousin Phil. He gave us $10. He said, "How much do I have to give the show to have it named after me for a month?"
So it's feels like one of those NASCAR races,
Yeah, I think. Hey, we might have to work something out here, Steven. What is a ballpark? He gave us $10. What if? How about 10,000? If he gave us 10,000, I will name the show after you for 1 month, not the whole time.
No, well, does Phil have a business we can promote too? I'll wear a shirt. We can promote it, right?
All right, who's next on your panic meter here, Steven?
Well, Alabama was 10. There's another 10.
Oh no,
Oklahoma.
Ooh, we got real problems here.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a. I don't know if maybe this isn't too bold. I think the next 3 months are going to make or break Brent Venables' tenure at Oklahoma. The first thing is, a defensive coach, and we've seen this at other places, is that defensive coaches sometimes tend to have a hard time finding the right offensive coordinator. Some of this I don't think is all Brent Venables' fault. I mean, the offensive line is a personnel issue that's just not going to get solved in one off season, and all the receiver injuries they had. That's hard to kind of overcome in one season. So some of this is not on Brent Venables, and certainly not on Seth Luttrell. But you had to do something. So I like the idea of changing things up at the offensive coordinator spot. You get a chance to evaluate Jackson Arnold the rest of the way with a different voice leading the offense, and just to try something different and see if you can find a spark. I mean, their last 2 games, 12 points. And you think about that Auburn game and how fortunate they were. I mean, all the big plays broke in their direction, a horrible pass that was intercepted in return for a touchdown. I mean, we could be sitting here at this team saying they could be 3-4. They barely beat Houston. And just the way that Saturday's game played out, I mean, the game was over within the first 10 minutes because of the way that Oklahoma's offense has been playing this year.
Right, and so they've already come out and they fired the offensive coordinator, Seth Luttrell. That's proven to be a disaster. Oh boy. They're rotating quarterbacks in and out. They've tried 12 different offensive line combinations. Do you think they weren't ready for the SEC? I mean, again, that's been said a million times, kind of mocking them. But do you think that's fair to say? I think it's fair to question, is Brent Venables up to this challenge? He's never been a head coach. And I heard it. I don't know if this is accurate, Steven, but because I quite honestly, I've not followed the guy, every step of the way. But someone commented that, heck, they were not even certain that he has been connected to a losing program. I mean, when he was at Oklahoma, they were very good. When they were at Clemson, obviously very, very good. When he was at Kansas State, they were very good.
He played under Bill Snyder, who was, incredibly successful at a very difficult place. So, yeah.
So it doesn't mean they can't dig themselves out of it, but just the point being, I don't know that this guy's ever been part of a losing program. So I don't know. I said it at the time, Steven. They jumped on my ass, but why give him an extension? That made no sense. And again, it was fine to pay him a little bit. I think he's like the 8th highest paid coach in the SEC. That's fine. I got no problem with that. The problem I have is why not wait and see in the SEC, and especially with new coordinators. You can never judge a head coach till he's got his second round of coordinators to know what he's doing. And this is blowing up in his face. And at this point, I would quite honestly, I'd be a little bit surprised if he's our head coach in a year or two.
Do you think that extension? That extension was obviously done, I think, for some recruiting purposes. Mm-hmm. Do you think there was maybe some internal knowledge that this might be rough coming into the SEC in year one, and so you sort of ward off any questions like, "Hey, he's our guy. Got this extension." And again, some of these extensions aren't worth anything to begin with.
Right. No, I think there was a lot of that because I was told that, and I've shared that. I even shared it with the Sooner Scoop people, and they were baffled that I would even question beloved Venables here. But everybody's doing it now. So yeah, but at the same time, Steven, if you have to give a guy an extension to quiet any of that down, or to convey, or to help recruiting, whatever, if you have to go that far, then he's not your man. And another thing was, where was he going to go? Who was going to knock down the door to get Brent Venables? I mean, and it's not just Oklahoma. It's basically all these schools. As soon as I don't know if he's a Jimmy Sexton guy. I assume that he got an extension. He's a Jimmy Sexton guy. But as soon as that guy calls, it's like we got to give him whatever he wants. But most of these guys are not going anywhere. Literally no one was going to hire Brent Venables that was better than Oklahoma. He was not going to get stolen. So I don't know. That was just stupid.
Especially since how long he waited to become a head coach. Like he waited to find the right fit. Like Oklahoma was the one kind of job I think was probably, I hate to say dream job because every coach kind of says that when they find a job, it's their dream job. But the kind of the crazy thing in all of this is watching that game on Saturday, and for all of the problems that Oklahoma is having, like offensively, their defense is really good.
Right.
And I mean, they held South Carolina to under 300 yards. How much was South Carolina really needing to open things up considering how the game was going on? But it's like they're wasting a very good defense on an offense that's, I mean, going to be pretty fortunate to frankly to score a couple touchdowns every week. So I just think that this next couple months, not only OC but quarterbacks, they're going to have to pick a kind of a side here. Whether it's Arnold, do they believe in him? Are they going to make him the guy for next year? Are they going to go into the portal? Are they going to go a different route? So it feels like OC, quarterback, those two, the way these two decisions are going to be made will define Brent Venable's tenure, because they're make or break at this point.
And we got to, it goes without saying, we got to fix the offensive line. I don't know what in the
Yes.
world happened the last couple of years to where this is the state of our offensive line at mighty Oklahoma, but it's pathetic, and I don't know how it gets fixed overnight. I know they got a 5-star committed. I guess they're going to have to attack the portal, but that sounds great. They did that last year, and this is the result. And everybody and their mother wants offensive linemen. So aside from quarterbacks, the most in-demand position in the portal. So I don't think that can be solved overnight either, unfortunately.
Absolutely. I mean, that's Mike, you summed it up the best way, is that every team in college football is looking for offensive line help. And some of the names, whether they sometimes if you look at like some of the high level G5 starters that transfer up, they do pretty well. There was also a handful of them that are just average, and they go to SEC programs and struggle. So there's not going to be a quick fix necessarily unless you take one or two high level players, and even then the hit rate on that isn't great. So the offensive line is one of the hardest positions for me to fix in the portal. You have to have a homegrown offensive line. See Georgia. I know Texas struggled on Saturday, but they were one of the best offensive lines of the country coming into the season. They were a homegrown offensive line.
Yeah. Hey, shout out Cousin Brandon. He gave us $20 here, Steven. He says, 10,000 seems cheap. I'll do it for 10,001. And then Cousin Phil came back with a $50 donation. Wow, what a guy, Cousin Phil. And he says, you want to go? How about 11,000? I mean, they're outbidding themselves in the comments here. So
the price is right. That SEC
podcast. All right, who else are you panicked about here, Steven?
Mike, I don't know if this is fair, so please feel free to correct me. I also have Kentucky as a 10 on the panic meter. Is that too crazy? Is that fair, you think?
No, I'm just laughing at that. I mean, usually I'm the overreaction guy, but here we are, and I don't even know if you're overreacting, but yeah, I mean, this is, this is another one where we're stuck. Both these guys, and I should say it. I should have said it with Venables. I can't even remember if I said it or not, but the buyout for both these guys, incredibly, is $44 million, not combined. Each. Mark Stoops, $44 million. Brent Venables, $44 million. Are we going to get rid of these guys? It's going to cost a pretty penny to do it, but I mean, this offense is such a train wreck. We 20. It says 20. What if it was kick return? You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know. This is just a disaster, and it should never have gotten this bad. This is a developmental program. Where's the development? Particularly on the offensive side of the football, we're wasting a good defense. And no, I mean, 10. I mean, 10 is a little strong. I mean, we did beat Ole Miss, but we have capital. What is the opposite of capitalized, Steven? Because that's what we've done here. And I don't know what the future is for Mark Stoops, but it's looking dimmer by the minute.
Maybe the most basic way that I'm kind of looking at this is, and this is not mean to be like insulting to anybody else, but I sort of consider like Kentucky and South Carolina, Vanderbilt, like they're going to be generally picked in the same like tier. You think that's fair?
Yeah. And maybe to your point, I mean, sorry to cut you off, but I think I said this to Cousin Shane, so apologies. I have so many conversations. I forget who I said what to, but here's how I frame this one. And I could be dead wrong. And the way things are trending, I don't even know if this is where it's at, but I think where your head's at, yes, Kentucky fans, now that we're in a 12-team playoff, they hope to get to the playoff. But realistically, is that going to happen every year? Probably not. But I think under Mark Stoops, based on what he's shown in the last 10 years, let's say he goes another 10 years, which I'm doubting at this point in time, but let's just say he's there for 10 more years. I think we can get to the playoffs twice. I mean, he's shown he can finish in the top 12-ish. So I think that's a realistic, we can get to the playoffs twice in 10 years. Now, again, is that what fans want to hear? Probably not. But if let's say they hire John Summerall, maybe they can get there more. But John Summerall could be the next Chad Morris, and it could blow up, and we never sniffed the playoffs. So this is just they're in a tough spot because it is, again, Mark Stoops is a C coach, but C is better than D.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely a be careful what you wish for. You don't want to. Then I guess Mark Stoops is not going to get fired anytime soon. But you'd be passing or giving up on a coach who's brought pretty much consistent wins to your program and turned it into a bowl team, as opposed to finding the unknown. The unknown might be better, but you give away that consistency, and we've seen how that's worked for some other programs. I think what worries me this year and why my panic meter is so high is, South Carolina won 31-6. Vanderbilt, look how much progress they have showed since last year. They won in Lexington. Florida, a series that they have controlled, they lost by 28 points. And, Mike, to your point, they scored, 20 points, but one of those was on special teams. In SEC games, 4.3 yards per play at the bottom of the SEC in big plays. I mean, this offense is anemic. And it's not only that, is just thinking ahead a little bit. I haven't seen it, and maybe Brock Vandagriff is just banged up, and maybe he just needs more time. But the offensive coordinator and quarterback spots would be massive concerns for me going forward. You're wasting a good defense. You're also wasting Dane Key and Barry and Brown, two outstanding receivers and a good defense with this offense. So it feels like panic meter for me is Kentucky might miss a bowl game. And also, what does that do this offseason to your two biggest positions on offense, your OC and quarterback? What does that mean? Because you're going to have to develop, or you're going to have to make a change. And they have not had a homegrown quarterback in a bit. It's been transfers.
Right. I think every year, I may be off a year or two, but I think it's every year since like 2014, 2015, since going back to Steven Johnson, I believe, every starting quarterback to start this season has been a transfer.
Because Sawyer Smith and like Terry Wilson were even,
right. And that doesn't count Lynn Bowden, who, I guess you could take, but he, we all know he wasn't a quarterback. But and what does it say about a guy? Again, he's the longest tenured coach in the SEC, Steven. But seemingly every season, it's like our hopes and dreams fall on nailing a quarterback out of the portal. I think that should not be the case.
Right. I think that's kind of my concern is you've now Devin Leary, good and bad. And now you have a quarterback in Brock Vandagriff that, he's been banged up. Do you think he's going to get better from here? I would assume he probably does, but you go into another offseason with a lot of unknown. Do you take another quarterback? It's a big question for me moving forward, what Kentucky's offense looks like and also what they do at the quarterback position.
Right. And Cousin Brandon, he has responded with a $50 donation of his own. Appreciate you, Cousin Brandon. And it just must make him sick that this sorry team we're talking about beat his team. Oh, and Phil has responded with a $300. Oh man, what a day! Appreciate you, Cousin Phil.
Appreciate you, Phil.
Tennessee ain't losing to that sorry team. I'll tell you that. Not after that donation. But all right, who else on your panic meter?
Mike, I've got three other teams here. I've got Auburn, which is a 7. Kind of we know same old at this point. I think 0-4 in the SEC. But it also feels like very much a missed opportunity on Saturday. Bowl hopes kind of hanging in the balance here. You could maybe be a little generous in charting a path to 6 victories, but Missouri was missing a starting quarterback and they still came up short. So I think a pretty disappointing loss, especially after a bye week. So I know it's same old at this point, same old offensive issues. But still, I think just the overall disappointment puts me at a 7 on the panic meter. Is that fair?
That is absolutely fair. Real quick, Steven, I'll address that in more detail. But Cousin Shane, appreciate you, brother. He says, Phil's been fading my locks. That's where he's getting all his money. But yeah, I mean, this is the same old, same old. Like you said, I mean, Auburn, we just find ways, we invent new ways to lose a football game, Steven. Sent the other quarterback to the hospital, still couldn't beat him. I mean, this is wild. This is wild. And I kind of kid. I don't even know if it's a joke anymore, Steven. They sold their soul to Hugh Freeze, and the devil is getting his due now. You know what I mean? Like that's what it feels like. And yeah, you got good recruiting. Okay, I got you. What is that going to translate? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think. How about this, Steven? I know this is completely off the wall, but I was having dinner with people the other night, and they made an interesting point. Hugh Freeze used to be an offensive innovator. The RPO and stuff like, I mean, people, it's been caught up. That is, it takes any fool can see that the game has caught up to him. There's nothing special about what he's doing. Same thing Gus Malzahn. He never adjusted. And they were making the same point about Tennessee. Maybe that's what's caught up with Heupel a little bit. But of course, maybe not, because they just beat Alabama. But point being is, do you think it's fair to say that Hugh Freeze, that whatever mojo he had, aside from the cheating and the prostitutes, that his offense is whatever he was doing has caught up to him, because hell, all these people do RPO now. I don't think there's anything special about his offense now.
I would agree with that. There are times when I watch Auburn and I'm like, okay, this is a really good game plan. Like, I can see what they're doing. I can also see that they don't have the quarterback for it. I think there's also some other problems with offensive line. And, there's some, receiver blocking that other people have pointed that one out too, is they could be a little bit better on screens with better receiver blocking. They are averaging 6.9 yards per play in the SEC. And if you take them just within SEC games, it's up to 6. So the per play production is not bad. At the same time, though, I don't think there's anything necessarily like overly innovative. Like, everybody's running the spread, everybody's running tempo, everybody's running RPOs now. It's really incumbent on Hugh Freeze to fix the quarterback situation this offseason. Getting Deuce Knight's a big deal, but it's also like, and I used this analogy a few weeks ago. If they want to be the Miami of 2025, the team that goes from 6-7 wins to being in the upper half of the SEC, they're going to have to hit on the quarterback right away. And I still think they might be a year away at that position. So I don't know that his offense really gets a ton better right now, absent like major transfers coming in.
Mm-hmm. And Cousin Gary's got an interesting point. Maybe the prostitutes are what's missing. We should probably move on after that. All right. Who else saw the panic meter here, Steven?
Sorry. Arkansas. Kind of the same thing here. I'm trying to keep it together.
Minus prostitutes.
Right. Sorry.
This is a proven fact. This is not us speculating.
Right.
Just to be clear, don't sue us. It's all true.
Right. So Arkansas had a 6 on the panic meter. I think just coming off of the off week and the fact they had LSU after the Ole Miss game, I thought we would see a little bit better of just a closer game for Arkansas. And I think what you worry about is looking at what's ahead. There's a tricky road trip to Mississippi State this week. They still got to play Ole Miss, Texas, and Missouri. The schedule is still very difficult. So it feels like they need to get this back, kind of pointed it in the right direction before they go to Starkville. Some of that's just been injuries, Taylon Green, Jaquindon Jackson. But it also feels like they kind of maybe missed an opportunity here because LSU came into this game maybe a little bit of on letdown alert after the Ole Miss game off the off week. Just feels like maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity here.
I would certainly agree with that. Real quick, Steven, comment of the night, Forrest Whittle, appreciate you. Not enough trash in the world to make Texas a good football team. What a comment. But missed opportunity. But again, maybe, hear me out, Steven, because I've not given this team any credit, and I pick against them every week. Probably continue to pick against them just to keep their mojo going. But maybe are we not giving LSU enough credit? Because I thought that was a fantastic game plan. They just jumped on the Hogs. And, I mean, they talk about embracing the hog there. That they embraced it. That they got up on Arkansas, and their defense is getting better and better and better and looking more dynamic. The crowd was essentially a non-factor. They showed up. They supported their team, but LSU put them away. We won 6 in a row here. So I guess my point being, Steven, I'm not panicking. I'm not panicking if I'm Arkansas. Again, yeah, missed opportunity, but an opportunity. Now going on the road, Mississippi State is getting better each week too. So this is not a given. Do not sit here and think that you're just going to beat Mississippi State. If you do not show up with a really good game plan and execute, you're going to lose. I hate to tell you that. But let's say they get the win. If they get one of the next two after that, Ole Miss, Texas, and finish with Louisiana Tech, what would it be? We'd be at 7 with a possible 8 at Missouri. Now Missouri's owned them, so I'm not saying that that's a guarantee or anything like that. But if we get to 8-4 somehow, I don't think that's a stretch that could happen. I think 8-4 is still one heck of a year for a coach that was sitting on the hottest seat in the country coming into the season. So honestly, I missed opportunity, said very well by you, Steven, but I'm not panicking right now on the Hogs.
It does feel like, and maybe this is too harsh, that it's almost like one step forward after beating Tennessee and then just sort of like one step back with LSU. But, still, I think very much with that schedule, the home games with Louisiana Tech, a bowl game should absolutely be on the table for Arkansas, which exceeds preseason expectations too.
Yeah. Terrifically said right there, Steve. I mean, that was your moment to be ranked. 2 top 10 wins. I mean, it would have been the turning point of the program. It would have felt like,
Yeah.
But if let's say I just painted a rosy end here where they go 8-4. I think every Arkansas fan, you don't want to lose a single game, but if you win 8-4, I think you'd be happy. You could just as easily tell me, Steven, that they only beat Mississippi State, they only beat Louisiana Tech, and finished 6-6. That is very realistic as well. And then we're sitting here saying, what the heck? We beat top 10 team and we finished 6-6. I think there would be people mad at Sam Pittman being like, we've seen what this team could do. How would you go? I don't. People are going to go play one way or another, but missed opportunity. Very well said.
It also feels like when I look at their schedule, I mean, I think they're obviously favored against Mississippi State, but there's no guaranteed slam dunk SEC win because Mississippi State has gotten better,
right?
And Ole Miss, Texas will be top 15 certainly. And also, I think, Mike, to your point, you brought up something there about LSU. I just think that this team is getting so much better during the season. And that's also a big part of what happened on Saturday is that they overcame the letdown perspective just because they are so good right now on both sides of the ball. The balance that they showed, getting the run game going, defensive, keeps getting better during the season. So some of this is on Arkansas, but also some of this is just that LSU is just playing really well right now too.
Yep. So any other teams on the panic meter?
One more. Texas.
Oh, I was waiting for this one, Steven.
I am giving them a 3.
Okay.
On the panic meter. Not too much. I think, to go back to something you and I talked about last week, I think there are 4 teams that can win the national title. Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia, and Texas. And that is assuming that everything continues to hold. There's no crazy upsets along the way. I still think Texas is in that top tier. I think what happened on Saturday night was a very focused, and this is the best version of Georgia that I think we've seen this year. That is Georgia's potential, and that was also the welcome to the SEC. There's big boy football down here in the trenches, and I'm not worried yet about Texas. I think they will bounce back. I think Quinn Ewers will shake off the rust. The offensive line is capable of playing a lot better. If there are some offensive line issues, they may not be tested the next few weeks. Vanderbilt and Florida, although Florida is playing better on defense, I think that Texas A&M game at the end of the year looms very large for offensive line and also potential positioning for the SEC championship game.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being very high, or the highest, obviously, I hate people that say, because especially at this point in the season, I mean, we're nearly November, ain't played nobody, but 1 to 10, Steven, what is the concern that is actually true? You would know better than I about these non-conference teams. And Mississippi State, Oklahoma, they may legitimately be the worst 2 teams in the conference. But, knowing what you know about Michigan and some of these others, scale 1 to 10, what is the level that Texas got exposed? And again, you just said they could win the national championship. So I'm not saying they're garbage or anything like that, but just that maybe they're not in that upper echelon, and it showed itself on Saturday.
That's a good question, Mike, because I go back to last season and just from they made the playoff, they were one completion away from playing for the national championship. So I think in terms of team strength, I think they're there. I think their schedule has been really soft. So to your point, like on the softness of the schedule, it's probably like up there, like 7 or 8, just of how easy it's been this season. I mean, Michigan's out of the top 25, not even ranked, just lost to Illinois. Colorado State, UTSA, ULM, probably all contention for bowls or right around 500 this year. At the end of the season, I'm projecting on those. So this has been a really soft schedule. I don't know they necessarily were exposed. I think maybe they were surprised, maybe, or I don't know if that's the right word, of like they kind of haven't played opponent of Georgia and we're sort of shocked at like these guys are just really good and we hadn't played anybody like this. I suspect they'll play better if they have a rematch, but that was a little shocking to see how Carson Beck didn't play his best game and Georgia still won by 15 points.
Does it concern you at all, though, that again the offensive line did manhandled is a strong word, but seriously got beat. Again, Georgia elite got some guys back. They've been missing some guys. Maybe this is just again. It's fun. It's so funny, Steven. I mean, Kirby coming out here. Wow, everybody doubted us. Well, hell, you look not great against Mississippi State. Kentucky's terrible. They should have beat you. Alabama looks average. Or average is strong. Alabama does not look elite. They beat you. You know what I mean? It's like they have given us nothing, no reason to think they were going to do what they did Saturday night. Now, their credit, they handled it. They did it. But Texas, they opened the door for this, Steven. Again, there's no quarterback controversy. Quinn's our guy, yada, yada, yada. And then they pulled him. They did that. And I would say both these quarterbacks look rattled. And Quinn, I think, is still hurt. I think that's evident. He doesn't look that good. Now, he looked better in the second half, but not good enough to win anything. So is that a concern at all? And again, not saying they're going to lose out or anything crazy like that, but I went from this is the most dominant team in the country to surprised maybe is a word, but it would not stun me if they missed the playoffs, Steven. Because if they lose to Georgia, well, they already lost to Georgia. If they lose to A&M, what do they value? They value ranked wins, right? Where's the ranked win on their schedule? If they lose to A&M, do they have one?
That's a good question. And not to mention, I think you'd also be competing with a lot of other 10-2 type SEC teams, like an LSU. LSU would have had a couple really quality wins at that point. So, I mean, if Texas beats Vanderbilt, Florida, Arkansas, and Kentucky, I am guessing they will not have a ranked win at the end of the year because I don't see Michigan getting back in there. They would have to beat A&M to have a ranked victory.
Right. So I mean, I don't know at the end of the day if that's going to keep them out, but I believe that's what the committee goes off. If it, in a scenario where they're, like you said, where there's multiple 10-2s, that's what they're going to look at. They're not going to look at. It doesn't matter where the AP poll or the coach poll or anything like that. It doesn't matter where they got you today. They have their own rankings, and I don't know. I'm a little concerned. But again, now they destroy A&M, they're going to cruise. They'll probably go to the SEC championship if they do that. But I don't know. A&M keeps getting better.
I think at the most like silly level on the offensive line, like when I was watching that game on Saturday, I thought, Ewers is struggling, but I don't think if like Patrick Mahomes was back there, I don't think it would have made a difference because they couldn't block anybody. And so
right.
It seems like to me, like you have to solve your offensive line issues first. A lot of that's Georgia. You also have to rebuild the confidence of Quinn Ewers, who does seem may not to be at 100% or maybe not 100% confident coming off the injury. The other thing that stood out to me too is when I looked at after watching the game and going back and looking at the stats, Isaiah Bond, he's been hurt. He had 2 catches. Matthew Golden had 3 for 77 yards, but the receiving totals in that game, all the highest receptions were running backs or tight ends. And so, I mean, some of that was they just didn't have time to get the ball downfield. But you had this great group of receivers. If you think ahead a little bit, if you play an A&M, if you play a Georgia, LSU, whoever it is in the SEC championship game, if you get there, they're going to have to be able to block a lot better just to get the ball down the field to some of these guys.
Mm-hmm. And if A&M's got one thing, it's that defensive line, Steven.
Yeah.
So this is going to be big boy football come November 30th. You know what?
Oh, man, I can't wait. I mean, I've been waiting so long for this rivalry to come back and just to have it in College Station. It's going to be rocking, and those A&M's defensive line against Texas offensive line. Man, it's going to be such a great game. I can't wait.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we got a lot of games before we get there, though, Steven. How about Week 9 SEC preview? LSU at the aforementioned Texas A&M. Thoughts on this matchup and A&M's slight favorite, 2.5-point favorite here is a showdown of the only two teams in the SEC that are undefeated in conference play.
At the most basic level, I think the first thing that jumps out to me is kind of the what's at stake here for both teams. It's potentially a spot in the college football playoff. It's potentially a spot in the SEC championship game. The only undefeated teams in conference play left, like I said, like we all predicted in the preseason and after week 1. So I think just considering what's at stake, considering some of the games these two teams have played over the years, there is a ton of intrigue for me. On the matchup side of things, we've already seen LSU's offensive line win the battle against Ole Miss. They're going to have to go into College Station and do that again against Nick Scorton and this Texas A&M defensive line. So I've got my eye on the battle in the trenches, but also on the other side of the ball, because LSU's defense has been playing better. It feels like LSU's defense and A&M's offense are both improving during the season. We know what the strengths of these teams are. Like, which side of those is going to win out? Can Connor Wigman pick up where he left off against Missouri? You've got LSU's defense and how they played the last couple of weeks. So interested to see how that's going to work out, because it's strength versus strength on the other side with that offensive line and defensive line matching up.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I wanted to ask you, Connor Wigman, if has to win the game for A&M, do you believe, after seeing him in 3 games, I'm not counting the FCS, whoever they played there, but Notre Dame, and then obviously Missouri, and then last week Mississippi State, do you believe Connor Wigman can win this game? And what I mean by that is just like, he doesn't have to throw for 500 yards or something crazy, but maybe if A&M's down and down by 5, 2 minutes left, and they got to go 70 yards to go win it. Do you have faith in him to get that done?
I think so. If my level of confidence might have been slightly higher after the Missouri game, he wasn't bad against Mississippi State, but he did throw 2 picks and, I think 15 of 25 for 217, solid. I would have liked to have seen a little bit better performance, kind of starting to stack good performances overall coming off the injury. So I think he can, but maybe I have slightly less confidence after the Mississippi State game. I don't know if that's fair or not.
No, I think that's totally fair. Now, how about LSU playing in Kyle Field? South Carolina certainly rattled them. That was a tremendous day, but Arkansas clearly did not. But I think, with all due respect to Arkansas fans, I think Kyle Field is a much more hostile environment. Obviously, a much bigger stadium, so it's a night game. No, it's great. You just won on the road, and not only won, you dominated on the road. So I'm not saying you'll be completely ill prepared, but could the crowd be the ultimate X factor in this game?
100%, Mike. And I think all we need to do is to go back to last week's games, because you saw after the Tennessee-Alabama game, and Tennessee's defensive players were saying, like, Alabama could not get their protection figured out because it was so noisy in Knoxville. So I think the crowd can absolutely have an impact. 100,000 fans at night and at Kyle Field. I suspect this is going to be a very hostile environment for A&M, especially if they can get ahead and get a lead and jump on LSU and keep that crowd in it even more.
Yeah, appreciate your cousin Rick coming through. As always, he says the D-line dominates. Le'Veon cruises. Wigman finishes. Beat the hell out of LSU. Appreciate you, cousin Rick. Which team? Which secondary do you trust more in this matchup, though, Steven? Because that to me is a toss-up right there.
I think you'd probably have to go a little bit with A&M, don't you? LSU's playing certainly better on the defensive side of the ball, and some of that's pressure. And maybe that's kind of the thing here is, like, if A&M can get home with its pressure, you don't have to cover for so long. I mean, they got the blanket, Mike. I mean, it's like
which coach do you trust more in this big? I know Brian Kelly's been around a lot longer as a head coach, but Mike Elko's done a remarkable job at Duke, and now he's clearly doing it at A&M. Which coach do you trust more in this big game situation?
That's a good question. Probably Brian Kelly a little bit, just a little bit, especially after the opener for A&M losing to Notre Dame. I feel like with the way the season has progressed and getting better during the season, both teams, slight edge to Brian Kelly, I think.
Mm-hmm. And then we've referenced it many times, but these are the two undefeateds in conference. But what A&M 4-0, LSU 3-0. Does the winner? Do you think they lock up a spot in the SEC championship game coming out of this one? So A&M would be 5-0. Or LSU would be 4-0. Or it doesn't have to be one or the other, but do you believe the winner will? You're not guaranteeing it, but you think that they'll make the SEC championship, the winner of this game?
This might be weird to say it, but I feel better about LSU's chances because they would get Alabama at home. I mean, it's weird to say. Like,
right.
Alabama not being that. Alabama's a huge threat, but not as much as they have been. They have to go to Florida, then Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. 3 of their last 4 games are at home.
Mm-hmm.
I think that South Carolina game for A&M could be tricky after playing LSU.
Yeah.
And you still have to go to Auburn before you play Texas. So I like LSU's schedule. So maybe if LSU wins, they probably get a little closer to the lock side of things. A&M, I'd like to see what happens in that South Carolina game, I think.
Okay. All right, let's move on, Steven, to Missouri at Alabama. Alabama, big favorite, though, 13.5 points. How about it?
Don't you think that's a little bit of disrespect for Missouri there? I mean,
absolutely, especially the way Alabama's been playing. You know what?
100%. I mean, obviously, the first thing that jumps out to you is this is an elimination game, I think, for the playoff. I think Missouri's got to get this one to stay alive, just given their schedule. There's not a ton of opportunities for marquee wins. Win this game, get into the month of November with 4 very winnable games on your schedule. For Alabama, it's sort of like stop the bleeding. I mean, they've really been struggling, obviously, these last couple weeks. You come home, Tuscaloosa, you kind of expect to see a motivated Alabama team. I'm not really sure we're going to get that. I feel like we kind of know what Alabama is at this point, which brings me to the most important battle, which is I think the quarterbacks here. Brady Cook, of course, he's banged up. How close to 100% is he going to be? Because I think if he's healthy or at least close to 100%, there's a lot of opportunities for these Missouri receivers against Alabama's defensive backs. And then on the other side, if you're Jalen Milroe in Alabama, you've got to get him back to the Jalen Milroe that we saw against Georgia in that first half. So a ton of attention on the quarterbacks, but in the big picture, this game means a ton for both teams in the playoff mix.
Well, that being said, though, which team do you think will have more motivation? And again, Alabama should have all the motivation in the world. You just said it. But will they be as motivated, you think, with the point spread, with, everybody disrespect? I mean, Brady Cook, he's a hero. Go back, calls Sunday. I mean, I basically, praised him to no end on the last episode. But let's call it what it is, Steven. He's not played that well this year. But he was a hero last game. Maybe that unlocks something in him. Maybe that's giving him a boost of confidence. Sometimes it takes a game like that. It probably shouldn't when you've been the starter for multiple years. But maybe it takes something like that to get your confidence to that next level, to have that belief that you can accomplish anything on the field. Which team do you think will be more motivated coming out of this game? Because I almost feel like Alabama will be like, yeah, I realize it. Every game is a playoff game now because they're fighting for their lives. But at the same time, I would imagine they expect to win. I don't even know if they consider Missouri a threat, whereas this is like a Super Bowl type game for Missouri.
So what motivational tactics are Eli Drinkowitz going to cook up this week, Mike? I tend to think Alabama will be more motivated and Missouri disrespected is maybe the way that I kind of look at this. Also, when I was looking at Missouri's schedule after Saturday, they've played Thomas Castellanos, they've played Diego Pavia, they have played some mobile quarterbacks this year, and Milroe is going to be a tough test. But it also feels like defensively, while they're not as strong as last year, at least up until this point, they have played some quarterbacks on the ground who can give you a lot of trouble, which should help get ready for this game. So I think Missouri can play up the disrespect angle. And I was kind of surprised at the initial point spread on this one, just given the way that Alabama has been playing the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Milroe, but clearly something's off with him. He has regressed, and he's not running the football. He only had 11 rushing yards against Tennessee. Now, he had some rushes, but he's passing a lot of opportunities to take off. And I don't know. I've heard mixed things, Steven. I've heard he's a little banged up. I've also heard that he's trying to prove to everybody that he can be an NFL quarterback, and he wants to get it done from the pocket. So, I don't know. I don't know if it is fair to say Jalen Milroe's an elite running threat, because I don't know that I don't know. He is clearly, but he hasn't been. So I just don't know what to make of that right now.
Already has more interceptions in SEC play than he did all of last season. So taking care of the ball is going to be big here. Alabama's margin for error is smaller than in previous years. But I will say, just on that game on Saturday, Mike, I thought for sure we would see him utilize more as a runner. He had 11 yards. He had 36 against South Carolina. I know you can't use him to go over 100 like he did against Georgia every week, but that's kind of like what I thought you would see is, like, in these big games, you've got to let him use that kind of mobility, whether it's LSU, whether it's Tennessee, like the biggest moments, you've got to empty everything you have. And I thought we would see a much more dynamic player. And I think he's going to need to be a much more consistent passer to win on Saturday.
Right. And he threw the ball 45 times against Tennessee. He's dynamic. Wasn't that long ago, Steven, you and I we both said on this show this season that he's the Heisman front runner. Clearly not right now. So I'm not trying to be disrespectful to him, but if he's throwing 45 times a game, that is a sign to me that Alabama's losing. Basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't know that's the game plan to get wins. Not in this conference. You need a little bit more mixed from him. I'm not saying he's a bad passer, but he's just not 45 times. That's way too much.
It feels like you need about 25 seems to be like, maybe the sweet spot there, especially since I think that's been kind of the sweet spot most of this year. Also, just in SEC games, Alabama is 15th in the conference in rushing offense. They need more from not only Milroe on the ground, but Jam Miller and Justice Haynes. And some of this is offensive line oriented too. But that's a little shocking to me to see Alabama that far down the stat sheet in just SEC play. Like, there needs to be a little bit more balance to take some of that off of Milroe's passing.
Mm-hmm. And I was doing the stats too prior to this, Steven, that Missouri is the best defense in the SEC in allowing the fewest explosive plays. So plays of 20 or more yards. They're the best in the conference. And I'm just trying to think, ever since the Alabama game, the Georgia game, Alabama's not had a lot of those. They had one against Vanderbilt that stands out, but very, very few. And I don't know that they had any against Tennessee.
I think you will take your chances with Alabama, like make them try to put together 10, 11, 12 play drives as opposed to let Milroe hit Brian Williams for a 60-yard touchdown. So that's a good sign for Missouri going into this game.
All right, how about where should we go? How about this one? I couldn't believe this one, Steven, either. Point spread. Texas at Vanderbilt, 18.5-point favorite. Have they not watched Diego Pavia, Steven? This is trap game written all over it.
The disrespect for Vanderbilt. What's going on here?
I think it's just a name brand. They see the logo. They're assigning the spread here. This is a huge mistake.
I think, first of all, this is like the perfect opportunity again for Vanderbilt to get a high-profile opponent coming on the road to West End. Certainly, Texas will be motivated and eager to rebound, and some of the matchups in this game, of course, favor Texas. Maybe the worst thing for Vanderbilt is the win over Alabama, they kind of lost that element of surprise. Like Vanderbilt might have Texas attention already because of what happened. But certainly, anything that Vanderbilt, the kind of season goals, the season, any dreams, it all, like, they could, if they win this one, pull off another upset, you start talking about they were already in the top 25. You can think even bigger. So there's a lot at stake here for Vanderbilt. And I think the first thing that comes to my mind is when Vanderbilt steps on the field with Diego Pavia, they believe. And I think the spread is probably, too high. I like, just right off the bat, I think Texas is probably going to be picked by most people. But having somebody like Pavia who believes, they've already done it against Alabama, if they can play that low possession kind of game, I mean, he gives you a chance to make it a 4-quarter game. And if you can do that, mighty Vanderbilt can make this interesting in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, over under on the number of possessions for Texas offense that will result in a Vanderbilt win. Does that make sense? So if Vanderbilt goes according to game plan, I would think that they will limit Texas possessions. If I were to guarantee you, Steven, that Texas had X amount of possessions, what would that clue you in that Vanderbilt won this game?
Yeah, I think you probably want about 8 possessions. If you're Vanderbilt trying to pull off the upset, probably 8 or 9 possessions. It feels like you want to play a game like against Alabama where they had over 40 minutes time possession, right? That seems about right.
But the problem is, I think Texas, believe it or not, what I think everybody believes it now. Well, maybe not after watching Georgia, but Texas got a lot better defense, I think, than Alabama. And I'm stunned that I'm saying that, but I think it's very true.
I completely agree with you. The one problem for Texas will be the injuries at safety coming into this game. But still, if you can, I think the key thing is they should be able to slow down Vanderbilt's rushing attack with Pavia and some of that. If they can slow that down and get Vanderbilt in 3rd and long situations, I think Texas will take care of business here. But it's still, I mean, it's one of those games, of course, coming off of the Georgia, when you looked at the schedule at the beginning of the year, you kind of just assumed, well, Alabama or Texas will just go into West End and win easily. Vanderbilt's much improved. So on one hand, Vanderbilt should have Texas' attention. But on the other hand, this Vanderbilt team can make things interesting. So it's a dangerous game for the Longhorns.
And this could be Texas' only ranked win. Vanderbilt's 25. So
yeah, that's true. What the world's going on?
All right, bad. I don't. Good luck, Steven. Auburn at Kentucky. How about this one? Kentucky favored by 2.5 points. What's your initial read on this one?
Is this the that SEC podcast, Jefferson Pilot Sports game of the week?
I believe it is, Steven. I could have this statistic. I don't think I do, though. I think this is accurate, Steven. I think Kentucky, believe it or not, is I'm trying to nail this. I believe they are 2-13 in their last 15 SEC home games. As insane as that, I mean, I believe it was 2-10 coming into this year, and they're 0-3 this year. So it's something like that. But goodness, I mean, this, and if they lose to Auburn, I think Auburn, I'm kind of surprised that Auburn's not favored. And that's remarkable to say because they've lost 4 in a row.
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy at all, Mike. It's kind of it's almost a setup similar to Florida and Kentucky, because you had Florida, which had a better offense. Could Kentucky's defense play that low possession kind of slow game and keep DJ Lagway off the field? And as weird as this sounds, Kentucky's going to have to win this game 17-13. Now they might be able to because of Auburn turning the ball over and the mistakes that they made. But it feels like this is the last ditch effort for either one of these teams. If they want to make a bowl game, you've got to win this one. So Kentucky and Auburn, bowl hopes might be riding here. The matchup of Auburn's offense, which moves the ball fairly well at times, against Kentucky's defense is going to be critical here, because if Kentucky can contain that, maybe force a couple takeaways, short field, there's your formula for victory here. It's hard to find also, do you have Auburn's schedule pulled up, Mike?
Yeah, let's get it up here. Boom. Got it up.
So they're 0-4
Mm-hmm.
in the SEC. I mean, if they don't beat Kentucky, Vanderbilt, I guess they could beat Vanderbilt. But I don't know. A&M, Alabama, it's going to take an upset to win one of those, don't you think?
Yeah. Now, I do think they'll be favored over Vanderbilt, only because it's at home. But last time I checked, and you're well aware of this, as the audience should be, Diego Pavia ain't afraid of going on the plays and winning a game. So I'm saying by the betting. I'm not saying I would favor Auburn over Vanderbilt, but yeah, I mean 1-6, 1-7 in conference play is on the table, and it's almost a lock if they lose this one, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like for Kentucky, this is also the best chance to maybe get a win in SEC play the rest of the way. I mean, they have the win over Ole Miss, but Texas at Tennessee, this is your last SEC home game. So I think just in general, it just feels like one of these two teams can sort of get a win, get on the positive side for once. I don't expect a ton of points just because both of these offenses have not shown the ability to consistently put together drives, and Kentucky defense as well.
And I'm not trying to be a jerk by asking this, Steven, but a legitimate question here. Which team do you think is more down on itself? Because I can't imagine either one of these teams feels very positive about where things stand right now.
That's a good question. Maybe Auburn.
Really?
I think for Kentucky, at least you could kind of hang your hat on that Ole Miss victory, and you took Georgia to the brink earlier.
Mm-hmm. And you got a really good defense.
Yeah, you can hang your hat on a defense that's
at least I thought it was until the last game has kind of got me questioning it.
That's a great point. Yes, I think that's probably one of the biggest shockers of the weekend was Kentucky's defense and how it played, and it was just the big plays that they gave up in the secondary. So I think they have a good defense, and you can kind of hang your hat on that, plus what you've done to some of the better teams.
But I think I asked that horribly, but here's probably the better way to ask that. See, which team do you think's got more pride and still wants to fight? And if your answer remains the same, I think you're suggesting Kentucky, which is that the way you'd go?
I think so. What do you think? Would you go Auburn?
It's so bad that we were like completely torn on this, but yeah, I would think it's Kentucky. But again, what are they? I believe that is the stat, 2-13. Now, I mean, again, some of these are tough. Well, not really. Vanderbilt at home, South Carolina, you were a 10-point favorite, something crazy like that. I mean, you should not be this pathetic at home, yet they are. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to make of this game. I really don't. We had about 7 of these last week. This is going to top the list on kind of like flipping a coin here.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if I have to say which coach I trust more in this situation, it's probably Mark Stoops, just because I think I'm using the word think a lot here. I think that at home, maybe after being embarrassed at Florida, and yes, They've had some issues at home already, maybe they show a little bit of pride and win this game.
I thought you were going to say because he's not throwing his team under the bus repeatedly, right, like one of the other coaches in this game. But last thing I got, I'm a big fan of Jocks Radio. Our buddy Pat Smith, friend of the show, 3-man front. Let me ask you that. I'm just kind of curious if you'll come to the same answer that they did. They reference this all the time because all they do is react to Auburn losses because there's no Auburn wins. But what, if you can think of, is the best win of the Hugh Freeze era at Auburn in the almost 2 years there? What is the best win they have, do you think?
Ooh, that's a good question. Is it the Arkansas game last year? 48-10?
That is there, but they say Cal. At Cal.
Yeah.
Which went 6-7.
That was an ugly game, too. Oh.
And Arkansas went 4-8 last year. Right? Yeah, 4-8. Yeah. So, I mean, we're sitting here saying, well, was it the 4-8 or was it the 6-7? That's his best win. I'm just throwing that in there too because it's that awful.
And if they had played a hint of better defense, they could have had the Alabama game last year too.
Yeah, I mean that would have been an easy answer, but
Right.
shoulda, coulda, woulda. The excuse was we called the wrong. That I didn't call that play. I'm pretty sure he said that after that one. I didn't call that defense.
I did see I don't remember the quote exactly, but I did see Hughes saying that, he's got a lot on his plate this week with the recruiting and getting ready for the offensive game. He's glad he's got a great defensive staff. So I don't know, Mike.
He's lining up his excuse already.
I was just going to say, it sounds like that's what he's going to use through the week. And then Saturday, of course, he can just push back on what he said during the week. So,
yep. Hey, cousin Gary, appreciate you, brother. He just bought a membership for Man with the Plan. Man, what a great community we got here. All right, how about this one, Steven? Arkansas at Mississippi State. This is a tough one because Arkansas coming off a tough loss. Mississippi State, they've lost several in a row here, but they are fighting their tails off, Steven. And I am wildly impressed. I don't know if you saw this stat. I referenced it on the last show. Steven, do you know who has got the most passing touchdowns in the SEC in the month of October?
Is it Michael Van Buren?
You nailed it. It's Michael Van Buren. And again, that's even more impressive when it's Texas, at Georgia, and A&M that you face. So there's no FCS here or something to pad your stats, but I am wildly impressed, as crazy as that is to say, with the fight in Mississippi State despite 6 consecutive losses.
100%. I think for Mississippi State in a very difficult season, I am looking for who are the players they can build around for next year. And they already lost Blake Shapen, and Michael Van Buren has played. I mean, I think given the schedule, he has played a good Texas defense, Georgia, and A&M, 3 of the best, if not the best defenses in the SEC, and didn't flinch and has played pretty well, all things considered. So I think if you're Mississippi State, you're just looking for positives, and that is one big time positive. But it's also, I think, coming into this game, I think this is a game Mississippi State can win. I don't think it's crazy to think that they can pull off the upset here. It feels like the timing is right. You've got Taylon Green, who's maybe a little bit banged up still. Jaquindon Jackson's banged up still. Mississippi State has had a very difficult stretch, but this is probably their most winnable SEC game left. So I suspect that Mississippi State is going to be a very difficult out, just based upon the way they played and also Michael Van Buren's development this season.
Right. Oh, baby, real quick, Steven, shout out cousin Benjamin. What a guy. What a guy here. He just gave 5 memberships. Brian Hall, you got you one. Cousin Allen, you got one. Suitor Ninja, sorry for your loss, but you get your official cousin. Feel better. Cousin Matt, sorry for your loss, but you feel better now. You're a cousin. And cousin Brandon Tully, appreciate cousin Benjamin for handing those out. And cousin Gary, $20 says, give Forrest Whittle a membership on me. So, man, I appreciate each and every one of you. But yeah, I mean, could we be sitting here, Steven? This is a scenario where, again, Mississippi State, you drop 6 in a row. But if you win this one, you're almost a lock to win 2 in a row and have some real momentum going into Tennessee. And I know Tennessee just secured a big win, but also Tennessee's got 3 consecutive games they haven't scored in the friggin' first half. So, again, I'm not saying you'd be favored or you'd whoop Tennessee or anything like that, but I'd give you a shooter's chance here. I mean, I certainly didn't think Arkansas could beat Tennessee, but they did. And if you're beating a team that beat Tennessee, I mean, there's an opportunity to get some real momentum here.
Yeah, and not to mention Missouri coming into and the Ole Miss game coming up. I mean, with Lebby and Kiffin and the ties and the craziness of the Egg Bowl. I mean, there's some games there that get pretty interesting if you're Mississippi State, if you can keep building on kind of what you've been doing the last few weeks. And I just think, considering how difficult the schedule has been, and I know the results on defense aren't great, I think you got to kind of tip your cap almost to Jeff Lebby and Michael Van Buren for just fighting through this stretch and also coming out of it playing well. Lost by 10 to Georgia and lost by 10 to A&M. That's kind of your best case scenario given the roster and the way they played earlier this year too.
Mm-hmm. But and then flipping it to Arkansas, though, again, you could get that bad taste out of your mouth. This is a team that beat you at your home last season. It was dreadful. Don't ever. That's a burn the tape. What was it? 7-3.
It was a
It
three,
was the
yeah.
worst SEC game I've seen since doing this. But here's your chance to get on a roll, and you're in a real danger zone, I think, because if you lose this one, season's going to go off the rails quickly. If you lose the state, I don't see any way you're beating Ole Miss and Texas. So you're talking a 4-game losing streak, and all the goodwill's gone. And again, this is why I said it. I think it may have been on the mailbag show. I don't think it was one I did with you. If it was, I apologize, Stephen. But I said, we were asked, is Sam Pittman completely safe? And I said, no, because if they start losing all these games, they're just going to turn on him again. And I'm not hoping for that. I'm not rooting for that. But that's what's going to happen. If he loses this game, I think he will get fired. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, because I don't think he's out of the woods yet. I think you've got to get to 6. And I think the most easiest path to 6 is Mississippi State plus Louisiana Tech. And anything after that, it's kind of gravy, right? I mean, you can beat, Texas or Ole Miss and you can get kind of 7 or 8. Obviously, you want to aim higher than 6 victories if you're Arkansas, but just trying to get back on the bowl game, getting things pointed in the right direction, that would do it for you. So losing to a Mississippi State team that is probably the worst team in the SEC and has a major rebuilding project on its hands would be a very, very bad look for Sam Pittman.
And can you tell us, Stephen, you would know better than I don't know anything about Tech. Is Louisiana Tech, are they any good?
They are not very good. They are one of the probably worst 15 teams in the country. Sonny Cumbie is their head coach.
Nice.
They just and also here's good news. If you want to do some scouting, they play UTEP tomorrow night, Tuesday night on I forget if it's ESPN or CBS Sports, but Conference USA is playing a lot of games midweek, so you could do some scouting.
Nice.
But they're not very good.
All right, so that's a win. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that. So we're going to get to 5, but yeah, I'm hoping for 6 or more for Sam Pittman because I want him. And I've even heard. I mean, again, I hope this don't happen. I want Sam Pittman to be there forever, but I have heard, and this is many people have said it, Stephen. I don't know your thoughts, but I think this is going to be his last year regardless. But I hope he goes out a winner. You know.
Yeah, and wow, I've heard similar-ish things, but man, I mean, I think what better way to send him out if that's the case than to win these 2, Mississippi State, Louisiana Tech, get to a bowl game. It's a tough slog in the SEC, and so just getting to a bowl game would be a step forward. And I think just on this matchup too for Arkansas, the line of scrimmage really should favor them here. I mean, being able with the way that Mississippi State has struggled to stop the run, they did a better job against A&M. But if you're Arkansas, even if you have a Jaquinton Jackson at 80% and some of your other running backs, I mean, this is a game where your line of scrimmage should be able to move the ball on the ground, kind of taking some of that pressure off Taylon Green, which is kind of why I think that they're favored, rightfully so. But still, it's going to be a tough battle in Starkville.
Is it overly simplistic to say, if Arkansas, specifically Taylon Green, but Arkansas's offense, let's say they have 0 turnovers, they should easily win this game if they have 0 turnovers. Would you agree with that?
Easily might be a little strong because I can see Mississippi State scoring. But yeah, I think if they keep the 0 in the turnover column, I think they'll win this game.
Okay. Yeah, I shouldn't have said but maybe by like a touchdown.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay. And then last one here. Saving the best for last here. Ole Miss hosting Oklahoma here. I was kidding with the best one here. But, I mean, first 1 to 3 points may win it here. Ole Miss favored by 21 points. Man, this was one, Stephen, I had circled in the offseason. I thought this could be one of the games of the year. But Ole Miss, 2 weeks to prepare. Are they going to cruise, or could the change at offensive coordinator, could that open it all open? And Joe John Finley, one of the best names in the coaching world here, could he open this bad boy up?
Mike, call me very skeptical that a coordinator change is going to make a big difference for Oklahoma's offense. I think a new voice, a new plan can certainly help, but unless you're telling me that some of those receivers are coming back, Maybe your offensive line was just mismanaged by the offensive coordinator. I'm not really sure that's the case. I just don't see how this offense gets a lot better. I mean, they scored 12 points in SEC play the last 2 times they played. And also, this is a very good Ole Miss defense. I mean, I know they gave up, at the end of the game to LSU, but Walter Nolan and this front, it's going to be a handful for this Oklahoma offensive line. Now, on the flip side of things, Oklahoma's defense, I think, can match up here. I think they can at least keep this game within striking distance. But the question is, what can Oklahoma get offensively? I will say on the Oklahoma offensive coordinator, Kevin Johns was promoted to co-OC. He's put together some pretty quality groups. He was Mike Elko's OC at Duke, and he's also bounced around. I think he's a pretty solid coach. So I think just having him more involved is probably a good thing. I just think from a personnel standpoint, this seems like a pretty heavy lift, regardless of whether it's like Andy Reid or like Ryan Day calling this offense. It's just a personnel thing to some extent.
And which quarterback do you think Oklahoma will start, and which quarterback should they start?
I would start Jackson Arnold, and I think they will start him too. I think some of it goes back to what you and I talked about earlier, which is you have to figure out if he's your guy. And I think this is the best way to do it the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I mean I hate to say it because Michael Hawkins did win him the Auburn game, and nice little comeback there against Tennessee. But it almost seemed like, and I'm sure this is not the case. I mean, these coaches are not idiots, despite what it may look like at times. But it almost seemed like they were like, well, this kid can run, he's fast. Let's just trot him out there. You know what I mean? And it's just like that'll work for a little. And I'm not saying Hawkins is done. I'm not saying he's bad. He's a true freshman. I mean, he looked like it in the last game. But and I mean, Jackson Arnold certainly had his horrible moments too. At Tennessee, he needed to be benched. But yeah, he certainly looks like a more complete quarterback for whatever that's worth. We can't have these killing turnovers. I mean, I said the stats. I don't know if you studied it deeply, Steven, but I mean, Oklahoma, South Carolina was essentially a standstill.
Yeah.
But they gave up 21 points to the defense, right? That's how they lost the game. So had they not done that, I mean, that game could have went either way. Now, that's easy to say because maybe, and fairly, South Carolina probably was not as aggressive as they. Why would you? When you saw what Oklahoma was on offense, the game was over 5 minutes into it. But I don't know. I'm not ready to give up on Oklahoma, but I don't think. I mean, is this crazy to say, Steven? Let's look at aside from Maine, and if they lose to Maine, they'll fire Venables. They should immediately. I mean, that's not even a joke. But yeah. I don't expect them to win any of these games other than Maine. Is that fair?
I think that's 100% fair. I do not see another victory on the schedule, and it's tough. I mean, at Ole Miss, at Missouri, Alabama, at LSU. I mean, they're going to be probably. I mean, I guess Missouri, maybe the rivalry game. I could see Oklahoma kind of playing up to it. Their defense is good enough to maybe steal a game here. But also, one other thought on the quarterback situation, Mike. They both have played 5 games at this point. There's no reason to hold back either one of them. They have no redshirt potential. There was some thought maybe Jackson Arnold would redshirt. That's not the case anymore. He's played 5 games, and so has Michael Hawkins. So maybe you use both guys, but at this point, there's no reason to hold back on either one of them. You've got to find out what you have, and maybe you have to play both of them in extended stints to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely fair. And then this could be again, I'm probably going to back off this now that we've seen Georgia annihilate Texas, but there's still a chance. There's still a chance. Ole Miss, you run the table, you're going to be favored at all these games aside from Georgia. You are a player. You're literally 2 plays away. You bat down a Garrett Nussmeier 4th down throw, you win. You do not allow Brock Vandegrift, who's never completed a pass 40 yards in his life, you don't allow that, you win. Now, coulda, shoulda, woulda, Ole Miss number 1 in the country. You know what I mean? So that's worth nothing. But again, this is potentially still a playoff team And you cannot let the fact that Oklahoma looks pathetic. Don't overlook that, because they're about as good as Kentucky on offense, and Kentucky beat you. So it's going to be this. We're going to find out. Ole Miss looked devastated. I don't know if you caught the post game, Steven, of Jackson Dart after LSU. I mean, he looked like a man that his dog and his girlfriend and his mom just got run over by a train, or you know what I mean? Like, he was that devastated after the game. How does he bounce back? Is he in a hole? I don't know. Does he come out firing? I don't know. We'll find out on Saturday, but it's going to tell us a lot about this team.
It really is, and I do think the 2 weeks to get ready will be huge for Ole Miss, because of that they played 7 straight games before they got the off week. But also, I do think Ole Miss's offensive line could have some trouble with that Oklahoma front. And if you wanted to sort of build a path of how Oklahoma can stay in this game, it's that defense doing like Kentucky did, disrupting Jackson Dart, keeping things close. Maybe there's a turnover. They can kind of find their way into it and hang around. I think if I'm Ole Miss, I just want to get on the scoreboard early, fast, and try to score, put away Oklahoma, because the higher you can go, Oklahoma just doesn't have that firepower right now. So coming off the off week, I think the panic meter will be very high for Ole Miss if they do not come out here and look good on Saturday.
Right. And cousin Gary, last thing, he's got a brilliant suggestion here, Steven. Tennessee on a bye, OU starting quarterback, Josh Heupel, 1 game of eligibility. Pull him out of the gutter once again. What a suggestion, Gary. Appreciate you, buddy. But, man, we went long on this one. I kept you way too long, Steven. I appreciate all you brought to the show, dropping all this knowledge. Any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
Is there any eligibility that they could maybe get Baker or Kyler Murray down there for 1 week?
I don't know if those guys would save him,
Yeah, the offensive line just might be so bad. But no, Mike, as always, looking forward to the week of games, and appreciate everybody who always watches and interacts with us. I enjoy it, and look forward to our picks on Wednesday.
Absolutely. And before you go, Steven, tell everybody how to follow you, how to find your work.
Absolutely. It is athlonsports.com. All kinds of picks and predictions and previews over there. You can follow me on Twitter at Athlon Steven, Steven L. CFB over on Facebook and Instagram.
All right, Steven, I appreciate you. I appreciate each and every one of you. Don't forget, shout out Cousin Benjamin for reminding everybody we're doing a family reunion on Thursday night. I can't give you a firm timeline, because it's basically just as soon as the pick show's done. So it should be right around 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 Central. Everybody that's a member of the channel, we're going to send out a Zoom link on YouTube. And it's if you're a cousin, you're invited to come hang out with me and Cousin Shane after the show. So that's all we got on this one. We'll catch you on the next one.